In keeping with today's focus upon contemporary perceptions of graffiti and street art, the paper I'm going to deliver, which is basically an art history paper, will examine the work of artist Jean-Michel Basquiat during the period 1978 to 88. And whilst Basquiat was not a graffiti artist, his work is often perceived as such. So in considering the implications of this upon the reception of his work, I will address the significant questions concerning the positioning of graffiti within modern art history and the impact of the racialized nature of graffiti in New York during this period. So a different slant, I think. Okay, during the spring of 1978, the artistic community inhabiting the areas of Soho and the Lower East Side of New York became intrigued by the appearance of a wave of graffiti writing, plain capitalized text inscribed in black spray paint or marker pen under the tag SAMO. Many of the texts criticized the lucrative elitism of the established art world, citing, for example, SAMO as an alternative to playing art with the radical chic set on Daddy's Funds for You, or SAMO for the so-called avant-garde. What intrigued the artistic community of Soho about the SAMO graffiti was that it was unlike the majority of street art prolific in New York at the time, and not just in terms of its location. The 1970s are, of course, remembered largely for wild style, the highly stylized tags and complex illustrative imagery developed by Michael Tracy, Tracy168, founder of the Wild Style crew. This graffiti art, featured in Henry Chalfont's 1982 movie, Wild Style, appeared on subway trains and uptown in the ghettoized Bronx area of the city, being largely created by marginalized working-class Black and Hispanic youth painting in crews. For the Wild Style crews, to whom the private space of the gallery was inaccessible due to the constraints of racial, financial, and class boundaries, the urban environment offered an arena for artistic expression. However, Basquiat was not part of this movement, and the SAMO graffiti, which he produced with friend Al Diaz, was intended purely to attract the attention of the very people it critiqued, and it did just that. By December 1978, both the Soho Weekly News and the Voice newspaper invited SAMO to make contact and reveal his identity. Basquiat was quick to respond, appearing on a cult cable access television show discussing his intentions and writings as SAMO. By June 1980, Basquiat's paintings were included in the Times Square show and in 1981 in the New York New Wave exhibition. A rave review in Art Forum magazine by poet and journalist René Ricard, who famously declared, if Cy Twombly and Jean Dubuffet had a baby, it would be Jean-Michel, raised Basquiat's profile, marking the beginning of his critical acclaim as a painter and securing his move from street to gallery. Later in the same year, Basquiat was invited to exhibit his first solo exhibition in Modena, Italy, and in 1982 he became the youngest artist ever invited to participate in Documenta 7 in Germany. In what New York Times critic Grace Gluick described as the art world's relentless search for new amusements and investments, graffiti, a form of creative expression once regarded as subversive, became the property of the mainstream, owned and sold for capital gain in a financially driven art world as dealers enticed graffiti artists into the gallery. Basquiat had successfully deployed this colonization of street art, his tenuous links with the graffiti scene contributing to his early success. However, this association with graffiti was to have enduring effects upon the reception of his work, as critics labelled him a street artist and considered his work, therefore, unworthy of serious consideration within the formal art establishment. In her recent publication, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Exploring Ambiguity in American Art, Jordana Moore-Seguiz describes the implicit racism of this stereotyping and argues that Basquiat's beginnings as Samo fed into the mythology of the untrained African-American naive artist. This view reflects that held by Basquiat, who during his lifetime claimed, "My work has nothing to do with graffiti, it's painting, it always has been." This need to clarify Basquiat's position as an artist arises not out of a denigration of graffiti, but rather highlights the historical distinction between so-called high and low art, whereby graffiti is generally deemed a low art form. So, how do we define high art? What makes the paintings in the gallery more worthy of our appreciation, if more worthy, than the paintings in the street? Is the value of art defined by creative input, mastery of technique, or by Marx's concept of specificity, whereby the specific nature of the object produced denotes the object as being not merely an object in general, but a specific object, which must be consumed in a specific manner, mediated by a production which not only supplies the material for the need, but the need for specific materials. In relation to works of art, the means of production creating a public sensitive to the aesthetic of art, producing not only an object for the subject, but a subject for the object. Within the canon of Western art history, the specific nature of works of art relate to the grand narrative, the notion of art being created by gifted individuals and enjoyed by those with the knowledge and insight to understand the inclination and intentions of the artist within the exclusive environment of the gallery or museum. This mode of consumption, as art is exchanged for vast amounts of capital, exhibited and appreciated, therefore, by a limited elite section of society, in short, Marx's superstructure, those controlling both the economic base of production and the forms of social relations in society. For Marx, of course, operating as a means of repression. And this brings us to the racialized nature of graffiti during this period. Describing the city as a product of separation, Debord reminds us of the alienation of those in society who have little stake in the production of capital. We understand that it's always been in areas of urban deprivation and from amongst those disenfranchised by capitalist society that modern Western graffiti has emerged, responding to the spectacle of capitalism with an expression of creativity that stands outside the dominant system of production and consumption, as we've just seen in the previous presentation. Within the context of Reagan's presidency, unsympathetic to the civil rights of minorities and focused upon economic expansionism, New York graffiti art, created largely by the Black and Hispanic youth of the Bronx, was seen as a problem to be dealt with by Mayor Giuliani's office. New York graffiti of the time was described by British artist Michael Craig Martin as visual intimidation, the impulse of the jungle, and by American writer Norman Mailer as monkey scratches on the wall. In his essay, Welcome to the Terror Dome, Jean-Michel Basquiat and the Dark Side of Hybridity, sociologist Dick Hebdige suggests that Basquiat, unlike Haring or Scarf, fellow artists who had links to street art, was compelled on the strength of his skin colour to shed the graffiti connection in order to find acceptance above ground, though invasion anxieties on the part of white tastemakers, dealers, etc., continued to impede Basquiat's reception as a serious, i.e. marketable, artist. Seguiz claims that labelling Basquiat a street artist defined him as just another untrained non-white artist. And certainly this limited scholarship on his work to a primitivist model. Making this claim, Seguiz is referencing the earlier work of other African American and Caribbean artists such as Romer Bearden, Jacob Lawrence and Wilfredo Lamb, who, despite their significant contributions to American art, are not generally acclaimed within modern art history. It seems clear then that the racialized nature of graffiti in New York during this period, if we define racialization as the ascribing of ethnic or racial identity to the practice of graffiti, and moreover, the institutionalized racism inherent within responses to graffiti art, served to stereotype Basquiat and reduce his work to what critic Robert Hughes described in an obituary as a touch of the primitive. More accurately, I would suggest that Basquiat's oeuvre might be considered a hybrid of European historical avant-gardes and urban American culture. As he moved from street to gallery, Basquiat's work carried the trace of graffiti within it. His paintings retain a wealth of inscription, signs and symbols referencing the language, music and culture of urban existence, telling the story of racial and class struggle, of what he described as royalty, heroism, and the streets. In the painting you see here, Per Capita, we see an example of Basquiat's very early work on canvas, a blend of text and image presenting historical information and contemporary commentary. Against a roughly sketched cityscape, the painting depicts a black male boxer in Everlast shorts. Above his head is a halo, a symbol frequently used by Basquiat to denote the heroic status and martyrdom or exploitation of the black male role models from the worlds of music and sport, which feature heavily in his work. The boxer holds aloft a flaming torch, an emblem of victory, and a reference to the Olympian ideal of equality. Above him are inscribed the Latin words e pluribus and per capita. The phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of one many, is taken from the currency of the United States, referring to the historical unification of the 13 original colonies. Below the phrase, Basquiat begins an alphabetical list of states within the Union and the per capita income of citizens in those states, illustrating the unequal distribution of wealth between, for example, you may not be able to make it out there, Alabama 7.484 and California 10.856 American dollars. Recognising Alabama as a poor southern state, home to a sizable black population historically repressed by racism and inequality, and California as an affluent white middle-class state, the viewer understands the significance of Basquiat's comparison. This painting really shows us Basquiat's enduring concern with the dichotomies of wealth and poverty, equality and inequality in society. In this painting, The Death of Michael Stewart, 1983, Basquiat depicts the violent attack by white police officers, which is commonly believed to have caused the death of 25-year-old graffiti artist Stewart, following his arrest for tagging the New York subway train. Basquiat knew Stewart and was horrified by his death. In this painting, we observe the artist's characteristic use of Spanish language to signify heartfelt meaning. The headline, De Facimento, is writ large, accompanied by Basquiat's trademark copyright symbol and a question mark. The term means literally undoing, an individual's ruin or downfall. The copyright symbol denoting Basquiat's personal comment, a trace from his early Samo days, and the question mark referring to the acquittal of the police officers charged. By the time we get to 1987, in this painting, Pegasus, we see Basquiat's enduring use of the written word, the ever-present inscription evolving over time to involve the incorporation of multitudinous handwritten photocopied texts, repeatedly layered to form pattern, making image from written form, and evoking Derrida's surrature, the use of deletion to add depth to implied meaning. The multiple symbols are taken from Henry Dreyfus's symbol sourcebook, a catalogue of symbols including those used by hobos during the 1930s American Depression. This unique style is symbolic of Basquiat's recuperation of the street in terms of issues, materials, and practices into the art of the gallery. One of Basquiat's final paintings, Eroica II, part of a set of two, created shortly before his death in 1988, is reminiscent of the crudest of all graffiti, the scribbling on the wall of the communal space, the stairwell, the public toilet, or the narcotic shooting gallery. The title of the work, it's been suggested, may refer to Beethoven's Symphony No. 3, but more probably it is the Spanish term for opiate-derived drugs. Painted on rough paper against a mottled black background, the text is partly obscured by smudges of grey paint. On the left-hand side of the canvas, we see repeated hobo symbols. This repeated symbol signifies one phrase, "man dies," and is partly obscured by smears of blood-red oil stick. Captivated by the dissolute glamour of 1950s jazz musicians and beat writers, Basquiat lists in the centre of the painting slang terms relating to both women and drug use. These are terms found in the writings of beat writers Kerouac and Burroughs. In the foreground, the letters TNT6H2CA refer to the chemical compound trinitrotoluene, highly explosive, but which in its raw form looks very similar to brown heroin. So this painting then depicts in such very simple forms, in crude forms, the harshest realities of urban existence. During his 10-year career, Basquiat produced approximately 700 paintings, 1,000 works on paper, and around 30 sculptural pieces. His work is rarely shown in exhibitions in museums or public galleries. Throughout his oeuvre, we observe the way in which his work challenges conceptual binary oppositions inherent within the modernist narrative, divisions between ancestry and modernity, high art and popular culture, the art of the street and the art of the gallery. So if we define graffiti as the art of getting over or making one's voice heard, then Basquiat, as he moved into the gallery, did to a point achieve his aim of his mission as quoted here, which he referred to again and again. What we see in Basquiat's work is his enduring commitment to speaking out against racism and inequality in society. And it's this that makes his work so compelling, the fact that despite his positioning in the gallery, Basquiat expresses the concerns of the street within his art. Thank you.